All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Nutrition with Elena. We're going to talk about nutrition for healthy aging today.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. The first thing we're going to do is start with our recipe that does take a little bit longer. So we're going to do the stuffed red peppers right now. So I'm just going to get started with adding the ingredients into a bowl, and then we'll stuff our peppers with it. So we're starting with a cup of cooked quinoa. This is such a nice fresh recipe. I like to eat it cold, and that's a really nice flavor with like a little bit of lemon squeezed on top. I'm going to do a can of low sodium rinsed chickpeas. And then I'm going to do a quarter cup of cooked red lentils. These are fresh off the oven. We're just adding those to just boost up the protein a little bit. And then we're going to do a half cup of halved cherry tomatoes. Now for this recipe, you could also add some feta cheese if you wanted to add a little bit of extra flavor and some protein. You can even sprinkle it on after the fact if you're going to be eating it cold. Kind of make it into like a little salad. We're going to do a quarter cup of diced red onions. Like anything else, you can always make swaps for the ingredients if you don't like certain things. So this kind of has like a little bit of like a Mediterranean feel to it with the flavor profile we're using. Okay, so quarter cup of that. We're gonna also do a quarter cup of halved or chopped Kalamata olives. However you want to do that. I think we'll just have them. And these really add some salty flavor to this recipe. Okay. Now we're gonna add some sun-dried tomatoes. So we're gonna do a quarter cup of the sun-dried tomatoes. And I did get the ones that are in herbed oil. These have a ton of flavor. I'm just gonna kind of slice these up a little bit. Okay. Now we're gonna add a quarter cup of hemp bark. I'm gonna do about 3 tablespoons in the mix, and then we're gonna sprinkle the rest on. And again, this is just gonna kind of layer the protein. So we're just trying to add some protein in, and we're gonna talk about protein quite a bit today as, you know, a component of healthy aging. And then we're going to do a half of a lemon juiced. The other half just put on top, or for your next recipe, the sardine patties. But I find it's helpful to put a little lemon on top of those as well when you're done with cooking them. And then last thing we're gonna do is add some olive oil. So we're gonna do a tablespoon of olive oil in here. So we're just gonna mix this up. Okay. So we have our mixture, and now we're just gonna stuff our peppers. Unfortunately, one of my peppers had mold on the bottom, so I'm just gonna fill it the best I can. And then when we're gonna have a little left over in here, I'm gonna just kind of spread it around on the side so that it still cooks. But I don't have a pepper for it. So you can always add a third pepper or fourth pepper if you do smaller peppers, just to kind of get as much of this goodness as you can. And I'm just gonna kind of fill this other one up. And just a little bit extra, I'm just gonna put in front. But I still want that. I still want the red onion to cook and the tomatoes as well. And then I'm just gonna sprinkle the top with my leftover hemp seeds. I'm gonna throw this in the oven now. And it's gonna typically take about 40 minutes. I'm gonna put it for 35 so we can pull it out and take a look at it. All right. Great. So now we're gonna go on to our second recipe before we start to talk. And we're gonna do our lemon dill sardine patties. And I know for some of you, this flavor combination might be a little odd. Not everybody loves sardines, but I think it's also because a lot of people haven't like really tried sardines in the way that they taste best. So I find that this is a way that they actually do taste good, and I think they kind of are a little bit more appealing to a larger group. You know, maybe people that like crab cakes and things like that. It's kind of a similar feel. So we're going to start with an egg. We're going to beat an egg. And this will just help to help everything stick together. I'm going to add in lemon. We're gonna do 1.5 tablespoons, and then you'll have more for garnish. All right, now so we're gonna add in our sardines. So I got the sardines canned in olive oil. I think if you get the ones in water, I would just add a little olive oil to this mixture. Because I think it'll just help it a little bit. So there's a couple of cool things about sardines. The first thing is that the smaller fish tend to have a little less contaminants in them, just because they're lower on the food chain. So less mercury, less PCBs, things like that. So that's that's one thing. The other thing is that these, since they're a fatty fish, they are higher in the omega-3 fatty acids than some of the other ones. So they are a really good source of that. And then the third thing is that and then obviously they have protein as well, which we're gonna touch on. But the other thing that I really do like about them is they are canned, full. So they have their bones in them, but the brine that they're canned in, helps to kind of like dissolve them. So they're not like a fish bone that you would eat in something else. They just, they kind of just break up. But the plus side of that is that there's about as much calcium as a glass of milk in a serving of sardines. So that's another cool benefit for them.
Those are sardines in oil?
They're in olive oil. Yep.
Okay,
So I think if you got ones in water, I'd probably just add about a tablespoon of olive oil to the recipe.
thanks.
I didn't pour like the actual oil in, but obviously they have some on them. All right. So we have these. So I'm just going to kind of mix these up a little bit, smash them up a little bit. And then we're going to add in our Dijon mustard. So we're going to do 2 teaspoons of Dijon mustard. And this really helps to boost the flavor. Add a little bit of like just different flavor profile. But that with the lemon and the dill, it's a very nice gem. So I'm going to do a 1/2 teaspoon of dried dill. And then I'll sprinkle a little more dill on top as well before I serve it. And then we're going to do the panko breadcrumbs. So we're gonna do 3/4 of a cup of breadcrumbs, and you can do the whole wheat ones. I just had grabbed these.
Can you use fresh dill? And if you can, what's the like the measurement compared to
Yeah.
dry?
I would do about 1 tablespoon of fresh top dill. We're doing 3/4 of a cup. I do feel like dill, I love using fresh dill. I do like the fact that um dried dill actually does still hold like a pretty decent flavor, unlike some of the other dried, like dried basil, I feel like never does, or parsley. But dried dill is actually kind of nice too. Great. Now form these into patties. I'm gonna do about 6 patties of these. And if you like other flavors, you can obviously, if you have a certain way you make crab cakes or other similar things, you could always do it like that and then swap in the sardines. Okay, so now we're gonna pop this in the oven and we're gonna do about, what did I have this? I think about 12 minutes on either side. So let's pop these in. Some of this out of my way. Great. So we'll go do our slides now. Great, so we're going to talk about nutrition for healthy aging. So healthy aging, we want to not only, extend our longevity as much as possible, but also our vitality, right? So we want to, be able to get around, be able to, still have good balance, all of those, very important things. And nutrition plays a big part in all of that. If you've been, acquainted with anybody in their older years, sometimes taste buds change. People don't want to eat the same way they used to eat. They lean more towards lower protein, higher carbohydrate foods. So just important to still be aware of making good choices as we age and knowing what to kind of prioritize to help us be as healthy as possible. So focusing on eating more plants, which we talk a lot about in this class, is very important. So we know that, if we're eating diets that have a lot of plant foods, all those vibrant colors, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, herbs, we know that a diet that's rich in those foods is linked to a lower risk of heart disease, stroke, obesity, certain cancers, and type 2 diabetes. So we know we've talked about how the plants, have all these really good things. They come in this amazing package of fiber and phytochemicals and antioxidants and all these anti-inflammatory compounds. So this is just kind of, looking at, and, we've talked about kind of like different degrees of plant-based and kind of what the risk is for certain diseases. So this is for type 2 diabetes, and we see the highest rates of that in non-vegetarians. So we do see a decrease as we kind of shift more towards eating, more plant-based. So a benefit to being semi-vegetarian, even more of a benefit to being pesco-vegetarian. So that would be a vegetarian, that includes fish in their diet. So fish and then like eggs and dairy. A lacto-ovo-vegetarian, even more of a benefit. So those would be people who include just eggs and dairy, and then vegan. So honestly, vegan doesn't see that much of a benefit to lacto-ovo-vegetarians. So if people aren't comfortable, some people kind of have more views that are ethical reasons that they're following a vegan diet. But if you don't have those and you're just looking for the health benefits, incorporating in some of those eggs and dairy, low-fat dairy can work and can be a way for people to get in protein as they age and all of those things. So we still see a benefit, even if people are consuming those foods. So the whole plant foods, so all of those vibrant grains, legumes, veggies, fruits, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. And I just think that picture is so pretty. I want to eat that for dinner. So prioritizing protein. So we know that muscle mass declines 1 to 2% per year after age 50. And so we want to aim for about 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal to kind of just get enough in. Now we're moving more towards like that lower number if we're maybe like a smaller person, smaller woman, needing closer to more like 20. Somebody that's kind of more, has a little bit of height and we're kind of middle of the road in their size and needs maybe more towards 25 to 30. And somebody who's taller, just a larger frame, needs closer to probably 30 to 35. So we do base it on weight, but that's kind of like the range to aim for per meal. We do have a variety of plant-based protein sources. So we know that our soy-based products of tofu and tempeh are, they're a good source of protein. As far as tofu goes, that super firm tofu that I think we've talked about in class, that will have the highest amount of protein, followed by extra firm. And then obviously our legumes, so beans, lentils, are good sources of protein. And then we have nuts and seeds, whole grains, have some soy milk, seitan, if anybody's had seitan before, but that's like a wheat gluten meat replacement. So this is just a little chart, that you can have, but it just kind of shows you. And just for a reference point, when we're talking about animal protein, a portion about the size of our palm, or about 3 ounces, generally has between 25 and 30 grams in that amount. So you'll see, For example, 2 of our sardine cakes has 18 grams of protein, so 9 grams per little cake. I'm not sure that cake's the right word. Patty seems better. But yeah, you kind of see like you know, some of the higher things, obviously like the dairy tends to be a little higher in protein, with the Greek yogurt being the highest. And then when we're looking at like per ounce, you know, it's usually how we measure seeds and nuts. Pumpkin seeds are quite high, soy nuts are high. And then we have our beans and lentils, a 1/2 cup serving. So like lentils tend to be a little on the higher side. Great. And then for cognitive health, focusing on food sources of omega-3 fatty acids, right? So we know that they can help reduce inflammation and support memory and cognition. So really there's kind of a push to focus on those food sources and maybe pull back a little bit on the supplemental sources of omega-3s that people might be taking, and focusing on foods. So we have kind of like our animal-based omega-3s, which would be found in fish. So things like salmon, mackerel, sardines, and then our plant sources. So walnuts, ground flaxseed, and chia seeds are typically the highest. Hemp hearts also have some. So, you know, if people are fully plant-based, the recommendation is typically to have some type of flax seed every day. So maybe about 3 tablespoons of ground flax a day, or a combination of ground flax and like the English walnuts. Chia seeds as well, you know, can get in the mix, and they're a good source. But ground flax seeds are kind of particularly high in those omega-3s. And then also for cognitive health, we want to boost our antioxidant intake. So things like berries, leafy greens, dark chocolate, they can all help protect our brains from oxidative stress. Leafy greens specifically have some good research on them. There was a study done that showed eating 2 servings of leafy greens a day actually slowed cognitive decline by 11 years. So, and it's pretty easy to get that. You know, in the study, they looked at like spinach and like lettuce for a salad, and they found, you know, eating like a 1.5 cups of salad greens and then like a 1/2 cup of cooked spinach really was enough to kind of help that slow that cognitive decline.
A question about of course, the dark chocolate.
Yeah.
It goes all the way up to like, is it 85% cacao? And
Mhm.
is there like a certain percentage you shouldn't go like below to get that benefit?
So typically anything that actually has the cocoa powder in it helps, you know, it does have the antioxidants as well. So I like to have people honestly use like cocoa powder, just because I mean, obviously if we want a little treat, a little piece of dark chocolate, it's great. But cocoa powder can actually be added to things, and it's actually, you know, very tasty. So like, you know, some people might mix it in with their oatmeal, like, you know, if they have a little bit of a, like, I don't know, like a banana oatmeal mix, and you put some cocoa powder in it, or you have a smoothie and you throw a tablespoon of cocoa powder into it. So there's definitely a lot of nice, easy ways to kind of incorporate that into our day in very tasty ways.
Great, thank you.
Sure. And then hydration. So as we age, we are at higher risk of dehydration for a lot of reasons. The thirst signal might not be there. People might be on certain medications that will increase their needs. And, you know, a lot of times it really is just kind of like not wanting to drink as much as maybe, we used to. So focusing on that and just kind of paying attention, and there's some kind of guidelines as to how much we should have, 6 to 8 cups a day, different things like that. But really a good guide is like, let's look at the urine. Is it straw colored? Really, that's the goal. If it starts to look like apple juice, that's a sign of dehydration. So just kind of really honing in on that a little bit. Choosing those fluid-rich fruits and vegetables, especially as we move into the warmer months. Knowing that if people aren't getting any active treatments, there are things that kind of even increase our fluid needs further. So if anybody's having vomiting or diarrhea or fevers, things like that, people need a little bit more. But we can get fluids, like I said, from a variety of food sources, really, and then obviously fluid sources, which we want to focus in on, like water, decaf beverages, diluted juices, milks, broths, smoothies, all those types of things. And then fiber. So fiber is another important part. And fiber can protect, can actually, we're going to flip those sardine patties. Just give me a quick second. Let me grab them out of here. Let's flip them. Looking good. They stay together quite nicely. Great, and then we're going to put them in for another 12 minutes. Somewhere my other alarm went off, but I think we're probably when that's done, the other recipe is going to be done too, I'm thinking. So fiber tends to be something else, like we just, certain things we just kind of need to pay attention to. And I do think that kind of intermittently checking in with the tracking app. I know we've talked before about like the Nutritionix app. I really like that one. Just kind of like plugging in a day and seeing where we're at. Sometimes it's hard to like gauge what we're eating and like really understand kind of what the breakdown might be. So fiber, important again as we age, keeping that digestion on track, keeping our gut microbiome healthy and flourishing. When we have a good gut microbiome, our lining of the colon stays in better shape. We reduce our risk of diverticulitis, which definitely plagues a lot of people. Causes unnecessary, if we can avoid that, we can avoid ER visits and antibiotic courses and all of those sorts of things. So keeping the digestion on track is very important. And then helping with maintaining a healthy weight. So we know that things, we stay full longer when we're eating a high fiber diet. We can eat, it's easy to sit down and eat like 800 calories of McDonald's. Like it goes down fast. People might feel bad afterwards, but typically people don't have trouble eating that much. But if we sat down to eat 800 calories worth of plant-based foods, that's really hard. It takes a lot of effort and a long time to do that. And then some nutrients of concern. So some things to kind of like pay attention to. Vitamin B12. So that is one that a lot of people like over the age of 50, our bodies just don't make it the way we used to make it. And we only really make it from consuming foods that have it. So animal products. So a lot of times, we do need kind of like the acid in our stomach for it to actually like be utilized. So as people age, typically their acid content of their stomach is decreased. Sometimes people are on proton pump inhibitors, so like Prilosec, omeprazole, those types of things. And that, can cause us to be deficient in vitamin B12. So that's something to kind of pay attention to as we age. A lot of people start maybe taking a supplement for it, but looking at the foods, and if we're looking to increase that in our diets, we can get it from obviously like those animal foods, but then also fortified plant milks, cereals, and nutritional yeast is another one that has a ton of vitamin B12 in it. And that's like a cheesy kind of savory flavor. And some people will use it in different ways, like different recipes that need that kind of savory flavor added. So that's just kind of something to think about as well. Calcium. So calcium's another one. Remains important, as we age. It's important through the life cycle, but you can kind of see, between 51 and 70, women are still needing about 1,200 milligrams, men are needing 1,000, and then everybody's needing 1,200 milligrams once they hit 70. And we can kind of think of it like if you have a serving of dairy or calcium fortified plant milk or something, that's typically like 300 milligrams. If somebody's taking a multivitamin, there's typically 300 milligrams in that. It's in a lot of other plant foods. So you can kind of see on this list, we have our dairy products. You see sardines all the way up there, 325 milligrams. But then also we have things like tofu, different types of beans, seeds, leafy greens, all of those things can add up, to a goal. But it's another thing, like we plug in a couple days of what we're eating, it'll show us how much calcium we're getting too. And that might be like, maybe I need to take a 300 milligram supplement or something like that to kind of make up the difference. I guess I had two of the same slide. Okay. Great. And then we have, as usual, some different recipes, some resources. So that nutritionfacts.org has a lot of, has anybody played around with that website before? Great. Lots of good little videos, on all sorts of topics. He has a whole book that he put out that's called How Not to Age. Has anybody seen that by Michael Greger? So he compiles all of, he has a ton of videos on that topic, but then he also has a whole book that kind of compiles all the research on healthy aging. So what's best to preserve muscle health, what's best to help with fine lines and wrinkles, all those different things. And cocoa powder is one of those for fine lines and wrinkles. Great. So that takes care of that. We're done a little early. I'm hoping you guys have some questions that will take us until our sardine patties are finished. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
What's the difference? Why does cooked spinach have so much more than raw spinach? Like when I make a salad, I throw spinach in, but I don't cook it.
Right. It's the volume, because you're like, if you ever take a bag of spinach and then you cook it down and it's like this big after you cook like a giant bag.
Yeah.
It's just a volume thing.
Okay, so there really isn't a nutritional difference as long as you're eating spinach.
Yeah. It's just
Okay.
harder to eat like this much spinach versus like, a small little portion of it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Elena, have you, so I just discovered this recently. I don't know how long it's been out there, but chia milk.
Oh, chia milk. I haven't seen that.
Ooh.
I tried it. I mean, like I bought like a couple little small boxes of it. I mean, I don't know, flavor wise,
Yeah.
It's I don't know. It's not super appealing, but I find that if I do like the Flav City protein or like a protein smoothie with it, then I don't mind it. But like just straight up
Yeah.
in a cereal or something, but with the smoothie it's not bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where did you find that at?
I actually got it at Amazon.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've
But I
definitely
think
seen.
you can get it. I think you can get it at like Trader Joe's might have it, and
Hmm,
I don't know, probably Whole Foods or something. But
okay.
yeah.
Definitely seen flax milk. I haven't
Mhm.
chia though. That's interesting. Does it
Yeah.
have any fiber in it?
Let me. I'll just run and look. I have one in my fridge. Ugh.
Mm. Great.
While she's getting that, I was going to ask about, the pepper recipe,
Yeah.
because it just takes a little bit of the lentils, a little bit of quinoa. Like, how do you cook a lot and then just use a little bit of that? What do you do with the rest of it, or do you cook extra sometime when you're making something else? What do you
Oh
recommend?
yeah, yeah, you're right. So I've just had this in my fridge since I did the demo last week. Um, yeah, I mean, you can always just use it for a salad or you could freeze leftover, you can always mix more in. So for example, like the extra that I didn't have um in the actual pepper, you could always like make a little salad with it and maybe add a little extra of the red lentils in. So that is a good question. I'll have
Yeah.
to find that.
And how long does it let you showed the container? How long would you keep that in the fridge for?
Yeah, probably like no more than 4 days. So I was doing some math today. I might be pushing it. We'll see. But I do have like the red lentils actually. I don't know if we talked about this, but you can add them to smoothies, like a couple tablespoons or quarter cup of red lentils, and then it actually makes it kind of creamy, but it also gives a little bit more protein and fiber to a smoothie.
Hmm.
But you have to be a little careful because you don't want to upset your stomach with so much fiber, depending on whatever else you're putting in, because that does have a lot of fiber in it.
Oh, that was my other question. Is that the main difference between using flax seed and like the flax meal is the digestibility of it?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's no greater like fiber and protein benefit. It's just the if if it bothers your stomach. Yeah. Okay,
Well,
thank you.
it's more that you're never gonna break it. Like the little flax seeds are so tiny and flat that you just
Mhm.
can't do them. You're never gonna get the nutrition out of them. So that's why we grind them. Yeah.
Okay, so for the chia milk, it has let's see, it has dietary fiber. It has 4 grams,
Okay.
0 sugar, 3 grams of protein, calcium 130 milligrams. It has iron, potassium 85 milligrams, vitamin A 108. It's got omega-3 fatty acid 740 milligrams,
Wow.
and it's 25 calories per cup.
Okay. That's actually nice. And how much protein? I'm sorry.
Oh, protein 3 grams.
Okay.
Yeah.
So fiber is great. That's good for the fiber.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds interesting. Very
Yeah.
good. Let me pull this out. It's just about to ring.
Oops.
Great. So we have our salmon patties, nice and firm and crisp. And then we have our Dr. peppers, which are looking yummy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they smell so
In the
good. Great. Does anybody else have any questions?
What's your favorite way to serve the sardine patties? Like, what would, make a meal with it? Would you put it on a salad or do a different side?
I'm like honestly having this as the side, it's actually like a perfect meal. And then just sprinkling or drizzling some lemon juice over it. Yeah, super yummy. That's what I'm gonna eat for dinner.